Evening, folks. Brian here. Monday, June 10, 2024. Hope you're all well. This is the third time I've done this video in the past 2 days. Something told me to hold off on broadcasting it or loading it up. After listening to Mike from around the world this evening, was probably the reason why. Hello, Michael. When I started listening to you less than a year ago, I mistakenly called you CO2, as in a CO2 fire extinguisher. Shortly afterwards, you identified yourself as CO2 instead of COT, Council of Time. Anyway, folks, I am definitely not here for notoriety. I am not here to achieve maximum subscriber count, views, and likes. In fact, I do not want that. I do not monetize myself. I'm on a disability pension from the government, which is not a whole heck of a lot. Perhaps for a similar reason as somebody else out there. I'm here for the same reason. I decided I'm going to do that video anyway. Load it up. I want to start with the year 1957. December 1957. In December 1957, something happened to the sun that month. There was a record number of 855 sunspots that month. On December 24th and 25th alone, there were 503 sunspots. That scared the crap out of the government. It didn't scare the crap out of NASA because it didn't exist at that time. I'm going to give you some examples. Yesterday, the number of sunspots was 10. NASA was hastily formed, put together, finalized by July 1958. Because of what happened on the sun and on the moon. If you're going to have 855 sunspots, or 503 in a 2-day period, what about the flaring? What if something large enough struck the moon? That was the real reason for the race to the moon. That's why they found glass beads on the moon. So I'm going to go through the number of sunspots for the previous months in 1957. 152, 117, 157, 175, 165, 206, 194, this is month by month, 163, then all of a sudden 244 and 263, then in December, 855. Perhaps something influenced the sun. Going ahead 22 years, 1979 was the year of discovery. The reason why they sent out Pioneer 10 in 1972 and a year later Pioneer 11 in 1973 in 2 separate directions was to get a triangulation of something they suspected was up there. And this was confirmed in 1983 by the radio telescope, the infrared telescope on board of a satellite. And of course, through the Washington Post and the New York Times in January 1983, and again in December 1983, the formal acknowledgement by NASA of the finding of the Planet X system, and once again announced in September 1984. They realized they shouldn't have said that, and they retracted all that information. So Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, triangulation, so they know where to pinpoint with the radio telescope, the infrared telescope, pardon me. So they've known since then, and they've been preparing since then, preparing for their survival and the continuation of government. But they've been suppressing this information. They also suppressed the life of the person they appointed, Robert S. Harrington of the U.S. Naval Observatory. They appointed him to locate and track Planet X. And after his interview with a gentleman by the name of Sitchin, an untimely termination of his life from sudden onset throat cancer. Now, since then, they've been quite busy keeping us distracted through long-term and recent predictive programming and mental conditioning. They also know they have to reduce the population. I want you to consider the movies since the late 1970s. Oh, 1979, late 1970s, early 80s. Oh, 1983. I want you to consider the movies like Deep Impact, The Asteroid Impact, the movie 2012, the movie The Core, and all the other Earth disaster movies. Long-term mental conditioning to prepare us for when these events actually do happen. Now, plans have been in place for some time, and I'll give you a hint. Plans. I often speak of and refer you to John Moore, the Liberty Man. Mr. Moore was a Vietnam veteran, Green Beret, Special Forces, PSYOP, intelligence, Middle East intelligence, and after that, a homicide detective. In one of his articles dated 2008, he wrote that it is far easier to implement martial law if the population is already under a lockdown from a pandemic, as he said in 2008. Do you see where I'm going with this in the timeline? Until then, they need to keep us occupied, preoccupied, working, productive. We are feeding into the system for their survival, not ours. We have to keep on producing the food and other necessities, maintain the delivery system, maintain the products for construction like rebar and concrete for bunkers. But something happened to change the timeline. The timeline of the arrival of the system was based on data in 1979 and 1983. Things change. Timelines moved up. Just like the timeline of the geomagnetic excursion in 2019, actually at the end of 2018, they found that the geomagnetic north excursion suddenly accelerated. That's when your government shut down, the 2019 shutdown, because they had to reset everything based on the new coordinates of the magnetic north. Let's go back to the pandemic. The objective. The objective was to introduce the substance which was created before the pestilence in Wuhan. A 95% effective, killing people. Do you remember all the scary videos in 2019? Let's refresh our memories. All those videos they allowed to be broadcasted out of China. The dead bodies littering the sidewalks and the streets, and they tried to cover them up with bags of garbage and pieces of cardboard and road carpet and all that. The videos of the people convulsing and shaking and falling to the floor and seizuring and foaming of the mouth. Italy. They alleged so many dead bodies they had to call in the Italian army and their trucks to cart away all the dead bodies and all the military checkpoints, the military officers with their SMGs, submachine guns. And the news allegedly of mass graves being dug in Iran because there were so many dead bodies. And I remember this one specifically. In one of the northeastern U.S. states, the National Guard came in to lock down a neighborhood, and they told everybody to keep their windows closed. Not a conspiracy, it was a fact. In fact, it was a test run. The whole thing was a test run. But the objective was, if you're totally clued in and awake, you know they developed the substance first. But they needed a reason to introduce the substance into the population. And that's why they created it. Why do you think they created the substance? John Moore knows. When things really start manifesting, they will not be able to handle the response of 8 billion people. Now, let's talk about the researchers into the Planet X system. I already spoke of Mr. John Moore. So, Mr. Moore, up until 2008, put in 28 years of research. Since then, another 16 years. That's 44 years. Now we have the Chilean scientist, astronomer, Carlos Ferrada, who put in 59 years of documented research, actual observations. In his language, he calls it Herculebus. Now, Mr. Ferrada, in one of his articles, put down that when it becomes apparent that the system is upon us, he will say they will use Mars as the excuse. It is Mars we're seeing. That was about 30 years ago he said that. Now, recently, have you noticed the news articles? Well, Mars has a changing orbit every 2.4 million years that affects Earth's ocean currents and climate. Changing orbit. So they're setting you up. What are some of the signs? Lots. Such as we're beginning to see. Destructive weather events. Tornadoes. powerful strength winds. Tornadoes where you don't have tornadoes. South Africa, Germany. A couple that tried to touch down right in my neighborhood in southern British Columbia recently. Didn't quite make it. Coastal water events, inundations. We've been seeing those. Brazil, Argentina, California, San Diego, British Columbia, Black Sea, Sochi. Increased radiation. Total breakdown, collapse of our jet streams. Increase in earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, heats, fires. In fact, Earth will split open from the outer core expansion pressure, the heat rising up. If you're really paying attention to the earthquakes, the mid-Atlantic ridge from way north of Iceland to all the way down to the Antarctica, a lot more than the usual. It's the unzippering. Moisture within the earth is evaporating and gone, along with surface waters evaporation from the increased ultraviolet sea level radiations that I've been pointing out. There's not going to be any more pastures or lands of crops to grow our food. They know that. Another reason why for depopulation measures. I'm going to sidetrack for a minute. Food. Do you really believe all these food recalls from poison this and contaminated that? Do you really believe that? I said this is one of the signs to watch out for. Or is that food being recalled to secret locations? So our protective magnetosphere has gone into a state of flux, which is a constant state of change and instability because of the approaching nemesis system. So the nemesis system is a brown dwarf, a failed star, with 7 planets, one of them being Planet X. Have you noticed on the internet news that the discovery of a brown dwarf with 7 planets 40 light years away, one half is truth, the other half is diversion. They're outright admitting to it. It's all part of the mental conditioning. Other news articles about the discovery of whatever with tail-like or wing-like structures and so on. So you need to consider all of these earth changes taking place and expect a dramatic increase in frequency and amplitude. And if it's true, as Mike suggests, just as it happened in 2018, 2019, geomagnetic north excursion all of a sudden is accelerating faster. That means it's drawing closer to magnetic north, which means, as I pointed out, the distance on the other end is getting greater and greater and greater. The opposite end is North America, Central America. How do you reduce the population? It's quite easy. Read Scripture. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. They tell you. The great earthquakes in diverse places, the pestilence, the famines. There's more than one definition for pestilence. It's not just diseases. Think about the 10 plagues from the book of Exodus, the darkness and deadly hail storms. And of course, the terrors and great signs from the heavens above. That's how there's going to be depopulation. See, I laugh at everybody who's trying to figure out, oh, who's the Antichrist? Oh, is Trump the Antichrist? Or is Biden the Antichrist? Or is the royal the Antichrist? Why are you doing that? It shows you don't know the timeline of Scripture. The Antichrist is not identified until the midpoint of tribulation. Before then, during the first half of tribulation, 1/4 of the world's population, that's 2 billion people, will die from the wars, the famines, the pestilence, natural disasters. The year 2025 is something that is known. In fact, it's planned. I've been saying for some time that 2024 is the year of stress. 2025 will be the year of panic. Other people are telling you, U.S. Air Force General is telling you that there will be war with China by 2025. The World Economic Forum is telling you there will be a global cyber attack by 2025. Bill Gates is telling you that next pandemic, which will be 10 times worse, will be by 2025. The Deagle Report, the Deagle organization, is a private think tank, intelligence organization that reports the U.S. government and the Fortune 500 companies. And in the report issued 2014, which they retracted in 2020 or 21, which reports that by 25, a substantial reduction in the global population, more so in the Western countries, by 2025. Me personally, I think it's a targeted hit list, not a forecast. Hint, hint. This is why I have to use scripture now. I use it anyway for the clues, hints, signs, forewarnings. It's all there. Luke 21, verse 25. Nations will be in perplexity at the roaring and the tossing of the seas. Acts 2, verse 19. Blood and fire from the earth below and vapors of smoke, and the list goes on. People ask me, well, when do you think the timeline is? Wake up spiritually. Don't cherry pick what you want to believe in scripture and forget everything else, because your heart will seriously fail you when you start witnessing everything to come. Me personally, I have a number of concerns or things I have to watch out for. First and foremost, the most difficulty is convincing family now the family will listen to me. Next, the weather events are going to increase. They're going to become more frequent and more violent. If you're on the other side of the country and you don't get tornadoes and you think, oh, I'll never get a tornado, you're wrong. If you think you don't get flooded, you're going to get wet, and so on. Next, if I am correct that the two magnetic poles are all of a sudden drawing closer together at a faster rate, the opposite ends, the greater distance between the two poles, is going to deteriorate even more the jet streams over North America, Central America. A lot more of ultraviolet C radiation coming in. And the rest, just take a look at what's happening. The Russian Navy, including nuclear-armed vessels, now docked in Cuba. '24 is half gone. 2025 is just around the corner. listening to Mike this evening, he's pointing out a lot of the things that I see. People have to hang on to their materialistic world. They are not going to prepare. The materialistic world is more important to them. A lot of people are so anchored down to the system that they are dependent on it. They're too afraid to leave the system. Yes, it is being transformed as a mechanism, a tool for the beast system. It is not the beast system. It is to be used by the beast. And again, we have to go through the first 3.5 years of the beginnings of sorrows and the earth pains, the earthquakes, the volcanic eruptions, the storms, the pestilence, the famines, and the 2 billion dead people. Figure out the timeline. Okay, folks. That's about it for now. This may be the last time I'm going to do one of these types of talks. I do not want the attention. I'm actually happy when I hurt people's feelings and they leave. That keeps the count down low. I'll be making a lot more reference to Scripture because there's the answers.